Hey everyone, my name is Lizzie and today we'll be talking about pairings with wine. First, if you're a home brewer and you want to know how to make wine, there are two types of wine that people typically drink. You have red wine or white wine, and the difference between these two is the color. So to make red wine, what I usually do, I take juice. It has to be red. It has to be the same color as the red wine. And if I want to make it white wine, I'll take the equivalent in that color. However, one thing I've learned throughout my homebrewing process is that you need a little tartness, you need a little bitter acidity in order to imitate the flavor of the wine. Therefore, if you just put water, sugar, and red food coloring, it's not gonna have the same taste as red wine, and vice versa. If you take water, sugar, add a little bit of, let's say, brown sugar to imitate the color of white wine, the taste will not imitate both wine. So in order to have red wine with a little acidity, what I do, I take cranberry juice, and the one that I take is organic. And why organic? So there's no preservatives inside the juice. Since there's no preservatives inside the juice used will not prevent the yeast from eating the sugar. Why? Because preservatives inside your juice stop the yeast from eating the sugar, and once the yeast is stopped, the sugar will not be eaten. Therefore, no alcohol will be made. So you want to make sure that when you choose your juice, there is no preservatives, that it's sour or bitter, and you're good to go for the flavor. That's for red wine. I take a juice that's red with a little bit of tannin. And for white wine, I haven't been able to find a sort of sour, bitter juice. I've thought of lemonade, but it's way too sweet. So what I've done recently, I took water and squeezed lemon, squeezed grapefruit, and squeezed all type of sour fruits in it in order to make my base. And in order to add the color, I added white sugar and a little bit of yellow sugar just to make the juice a little bit darker and to resemble white wine color. However, once you add lemon, so this was one of my first batches, I've added lemon and the fermentation didn't work because the pH was too low. So yeast likes performing in an environment of 5.2 pH. And if it's lower than that, in the case of acid liquid, the yeast will not eat the sugar. Therefore, in order to increase the pH, I added a bunch of baking soda, and since then I found something that tastes better, sodium bicarbonate. And by adding sodium bicarbonate, this increases your pH so the fermentation can go smoothly and you can make your alcohol. So what to pair with wine, you may ask? First of all, your wine has to be more acid than the food. Your wine has to be more sweet than the food. And your wine has to have the same amount of intensity, the same amount of flavor intensity as the food. For example, when you want to pair red wine, so red wine has this bold flavor, you want to pair with bold red meat. When it comes to white wine, you want something with less bold of a flavor, like fish, for example, or chicken. And if you have really bitter wine, so there's a lot of tannin, it's best to pair with fat. And a little side note, it's better to match the wine with the sauce than with the meat itself. There are 6 basic tastes when pairing food and wine. Number 1 is salt, then there's acid, sweet, bitter is another taste, the fat taste, and spices. So these are 6 types of tastes that you'll see in food. And there are also 3 categories of wine. So the first category of wine is red wine, where there's typically more bitterness. The second category is white wine, rosé, or sparkling wine. This has more acidity. And there's sweet wine or dessert wine, where there's more sweetness. Therefore, you have to match these 3 pairs of wine with the 6 flavors of food. But how do you determine the taste components in the food? So you have to simplify the dish down to its most dominant taste. For example, is this food salty? Is it sour? Is it sweet? Is it spicy? Is it fatty? First of all, if we take chips, for example, it would be considered salty and fatty. If you're eating salad, the main taste would be sourness and bitterness. So now let's break this down into specific examples and determine what wine pairs with specific food. We have white wine that pairs well with green vegetables and fish. One thing to avoid is red wine and fish because it brings out the negative flavors in each. Now, sparkling wine, this one is a crowd favorite because it pairs with anything since it cleanses your palate. And some might think that chocolate could be paired with wine, but it doesn't. Chocolate and wine do not pair together because the bitterness of the wine and the bitterness of the chocolate don't complement each other and they just give a bitter and sour taste. So let's have a little example. What would you pair fish tacos with? What type of wine would you pair it with? Earlier, we mentioned not to pair red wine with fish. Therefore, in this case, we would pair white wine with fish tacos. And fish, since it has a fishy taste, it pairs well with wine that cleanses the palate. And the wines that cleanse the palate are sparkling wine, rosé, or white wine. When it comes to dessert wine, it's best to pair this with desserts and the type of meat that you'll find on your charcuterie board. So the meat that's already pre-cooked, that you don't have to cook in a barbecue, on the stove, or in the air fryer. In other words, it's processed meat. So processed meat works well with dessert wine. And once again, simple red meat pairs well with red wine. So if we have to do a little test, I'm just gonna name you one food and let me know what is the best wine to pair with. So let's say fish. I'm gonna give you a few seconds. So if you said white wine, that is correct. It's the best wine to pair with fish. Now the next one, let's take steak. I'm gonna give you another few seconds. If you said red wine, that's correct. It's bold flavors. And if you're eating macaroni and cheese, I'll give you a few seconds. When in doubt, I would always go for sparkling wine because sparkling is a palate cleanser and it goes with everything. And if you'd like different tips and tricks on how to pair wine with food, you can book a class. The link is in the description below. And if you found this video valuable, share with a friend. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.